Reading is an essential skill that affects a person's job prospects, interpersonal communication, and access to reliable information, among many other things. It's also a highly complex skill, requiring a reader to integrate auditory, visual, and conceptual components as they convert squiggles on a page into something that not only says something, but means something. Even then, the task isn't finished, because reading doesn't automatically equal reading fluency. Reading fluency is the ease and speed with which a person takes in written information, without having to stop to decipher words, unless they're in my handwriting, in which case even I can't decipher it most of the time. Reading fluency is a skill that is built over time, and it's indispensable as kids grow into independent adults. You can't avoid scams, or research topics that interest you, or give your boss the report they asked for, or know what you're signing or being notified of or voting for if you don't read fluently. You can't be aware of your tone in an email or assess if a news article is biased if you don't read fluently. And if you're not reading fluently, chances are you'll avoid situations where you need to read and cut yourself off from even more information and opportunities. That's not to say that non-fluent readers don't live highly productive, rich lives where they use their intelligence and creativity every day. Podcasts and YouTube channels are making quality information more accessible with minimal reading. But you still have to read some to get there. And reading makes so much more of the world available to a person. It empowers them for so many situations that it's really one of the most valuable assets you can give somebody. Holyoke is one of the places where your help is most needed. In 2023, only 14% of our city's third graders could read at grade level or above. This is a critical age. In general, kids who struggle with reading in fourth grade will struggle for the rest of their academic career. Most of our statistics don't improve as you move up grade levels. Don't let this daunt you. Reading is learned word by word, letter by letter, and differences are made child by child. So how do we help kids learn this incredibly important skill? First, let's talk about what's in place at Homework House. There is a classroom lead in each room. They're a resource for you and oversee the whole room. So communicate with your teacher. Ask questions, make suggestions. Tutors usually have great ideas, so if you have an idea, bring it to your classroom lead. It's also super important and helpful to check in with them before and after your shift about the kids you're tutoring, and fill out your daily progress report for the next tutor so that everyone can be on the same page. Also, each child has an individualized plan. Their reading level is assessed every 3 months, with materials provided for that reading level. Lastly, while we do ask that you defer to your classroom lead, here is your official permission to take ownership. This is your class too. Nuts and bolts time. How do we do this? We're going to talk about how to help kids who aren't reading yet, and then about how to help kids who are reading but who may be struggling with it. First, though, for both readers and non-readers, it starts with attention. The first thing is to check to make sure you have their attention. Make eye contact. Check that they're making eye contact back. When you have their attention, keep it by breaking things into manageable chunks. Give 1 to 2 step directions and check that they understand each one. With more steps than that, people often get lost, and if they miss the first step, then they're confused when the second comes along and they're a lot more likely to give up. Use a timer so that they have a clear goal and a manageable time frame. In general, spend 10 to 15 minutes on a task. 20 minutes is just too much for vocab. Set your timer and be done when it's done. Take it one assignment at a time. The writer Anne Lamott tells a story of her brother working on a school project about ornithology. He had left it to the last possible night and was completely overwhelmed. Their father sat down with him at the table and said, "Just take it bird by bird." The number of things our kids need to work on can feel so impossible to them when they look at it as a whole. Just take it bird by bird. Another way to help keep kids' attention is to make things hands-on as much as possible. We have alphabet tiles. You can work on building words instead of just writing words. You can send kids on a scavenger hunt through books or magazines or the room for the sight words they're working on. You can do skywriting, where kids put their dominant arm out in front of them and write words in giant letters in the air. This is also a great medicine ball workout, by the way. Remember, literacy makes you tough. You can also help kids maintain their attention by working with them in a small group. Doing things in small groups is tutoring gold. Finally, find things they care about. If a kid really loves horses, see if there's a book with horses you can read. And it doesn't have to just be interests. It can go deeper than that. What burdens the child you're working with? What upsets or intrigues them? If they're passionate about fairness, read stories about the civil rights or women's suffrage movements. If they're sad about bullying, find the books that talk about friendship or kindness or standing up for people. You can't always make a person care about school, but you can find the things that they already care about and empower them for them. And that's what school's supposed to be preparing them for anyway. As important as attention is, it's not everything. We also want to create a comfortable environment because it's really hard to learn when you're nervous or on edge. Use caring language. Show them that you love them, even when they're having behavior issues. Use materials that aren't intimidating. If you need to pick something with bigger print and fewer words, do. With activities like vocabulary, pick the ones that they already know first so that they move into it feeling confident. And then celebrate their accomplishments. It doesn't have to be a big thing in order to be worth celebrating. We'll talk about that more in our video on behavior management. For now, just remember that praising the little things they do well builds an environment where they can succeed. Now let's look at strategies for non-readers. Generally, this is for the 1st to 3rd grade range. There are 2 major tools kids need in reading: phonics and sight words. These used to be divided. There were some schools that taught it all by phonics, which have so many exceptions that they don't always work. And then there were some that were teaching whole reading, where a child had to simply recognize the word. A dear friend of mine switched schools several times right around the time this debate was going on, and he got really confused. But the truth is, kids need both. They need phonics in order to be empowered as readers. You can't learn new words on your own if you never learn the building blocks they're made of. But kids also need sight words. These are words a reader needs to memorize in order to build fluency. Many of them don't sound like their spellings, so sounding them out isn't useful. And if you spend all your time decoding the words, you end up losing their meaning in all of the work it takes to decipher them. Most importantly, if you have to sound every word out every time, you don't build up the speed and comfort level to read fluently. With non-readers, start with phonics games and pre-reading activities. Use poems and rhyming games to help them develop their awareness of rhyme and learn to distinguish between sounds. Develop their awareness of print by exposing kids to printed materials or tactile print objects like letter blocks in a context where there's not pressure to do something with it. As you're starting to learn phonics, there's a progression to it. It starts with learning letters, working on linking a sound with something visual. From there, you can start using word families. If you can read fan, you can read man, can, pan, dan. And then you'll get into blending sounds. Usually they'll start with endings like ing and ed, and simple blends like bull and st. Then you're going to move into what they call diagraphs, 2 letters that together make a single unique sound. Things like th and ch and sh. Eventually, you move into the stupid ones like r and n. As you begin to move from phonics into words, use sound manipulation games. Build words with letter tiles, or have one kid read a word from the list and the other put it together, and then switch. Write sight words on the board, and have kids draw a picture of what that word means. And as you begin to move from words into reading together, make predictions about the story as you go. Stress the ideas and organization of the book. Give the child chances to tell what they already know about the topic. This can be really important because it helps them to own what they're doing. Make flashcards of sight words. Play games like building sentences out of them. Provide opportunities for kids to reread and read together. If you're going to read in a small group of kids, you should have 2 to 3 kids reading together, no more, and you can have them take turns or read chorally. I've spent a lot of time in choirs, and I can tell you, there are a lot of notes that people will go for in a group that they would never dream of attempting in a solo. When kids are reading chorally, their strengths and weaknesses blend, and they carry each other along. It gives you courage because the things that you're not sure of don't stand out as much. Lastly, just keep in mind some of the fundamental concepts about print materials, such as making sure you're using legible handwriting, or checking to make sure the size and number of words is at a manageable, non-intimidating level for the child. What about when a kid is already reading? How do we help a kid go from being able to decipher a text to being able to interact with a text and access all that it was intended for? Well, let's look at some strategies and behaviors of good readers. The first is visualization. Take time with your reader to ask them how they picture a character or what they imagine a scene looks like. And visualization isn't strictly visual. See if they can identify the tone in which they think a piece of dialogue would be said. Another great thing to work on is identifying the purpose of the text. Is this fiction? Is it history? With older kids, you may even get into questions of, is this meant to share a fact or an opinion? Or an opinion disguised as a fact? Have your reader use what they already know about different text structures to figure out what that particular piece of text is supposed to be doing. Good reading technique also includes pausing and summarizing. Good listeners do this in conversation. They pause to reflect back what you've said and check that they're understanding it right. Pausing to summarize helps a reader make sure they're understanding the text and allows them to pull out what's most important in it so that they can organize their thoughts, remember key points of what they're reading, and integrate it into what they already know. Another good practice for reading, and for most of life, is asking questions. What do you think is going to happen next? Why is this character doing this? What could they have done instead? Asking questions helps develop critical thinking skills, and it allows the reader to engage with the text in a participatory way rather than just passively experiencing it. As you're reading, identify and practice new vocabulary. When I was in school, my mom would have me underline in pencil any word that I didn't know, and then look it up in the dictionary afterwards. Those lists then became some of my vocabulary lists. When you come across words a kid doesn't know, make note of them. You can underline them, you can write them down, you can use a dictionary or explain it yourself, and then practice with the new word. Take turns making up sentences that use it, or discuss scenarios in which it is or isn't applicable. Do you feel amiable when a friend makes fun of you? When you know just how to help someone with your favorite subject? Okay. How about when someone invites you to meet their new puppy? Great. Good readers also reread. It's easy to miss things when you only go through them once. That's why we make lists when we go to the grocery store. It's helpful to have something to go back to. And in good writing, there's often a lot more to get out of it than you got the first time. You can also encourage your readers to make connections. I was blown away when I was working in children's theater, and a fairly young kid made a connection between 2 wildly different plays. But sure enough, the attitude that he saw in a character from The Little Mermaid was exactly the same attitude we'd seen in a character the semester before in Fiddler on the Roof. It may be a connection to another story, or to their own life, or to what they're learning in social studies. There are plenty of connections within a book as well. There may be a connection to another character in the same story, or it may be a connection to the main character's past, like when they're trying the same task in a new way, or when a place or object that was important before comes back up again. Encourage your reader to make connections. Again, this helps them go from being a passive receiver of the story into gleaning all the richness of what's there. This is related to the practice of drawing inferences, which is also a highly important skill. Authors trust their readers to make assumptions, based on the pieces that they've given them to put together. You can work with kids on drawing inferences by pointing out a couple of the pieces the author gave them and asking what they think they add up to. You can also check in with the kid about the inferences they're drawing and help them modify those inferences as needed with other clues from the text. You're right, they live in the same house, so they might be brother and sister. But it also says she purred when she sat on his bed, so she might be his... It's also great to dig deeper into information in the text. If your story is about a sloth, and neither of you know much about sloths, you might look them up to round out your understanding of the story. Or if it's a historical book about a time period you haven't studied, that can be a great jumping-off point to learn more about the historical events they mention, so you get a better sense of what's going on, and a better understanding of history, too. Lastly, good readers use self-monitoring. They check in with themselves about the difficulty level of the book, and they seek help when it's needed. A good way to do this is to count on your fingers. How many words on this page are new? If you have all 5 fingers out, it's too hard. If you've only got one, you're ready for a more challenging book. Reading takes you into another world. Your job as a reading tutor is first to help create a space where kids can be ready to step into that world, a space where they can feel focused and comfortable. Second, it's to help unlock the door to that world by giving them the keys, phonics and sight words, and ways to learn new words. And finally, it's to help them experience and navigate that world by learning to ask good questions and engage deeply with the text.